Welcome to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Micah and we're going to dive into some excellent benefits. And with me to make sure we get into this is my co-host, Tammy Flanagan. Tammy, it's been a little while. How have you been?
It has been, Micah. It's been a crazy year, so I'm glad we're going to regroup together and start to talk about some of the things that are going on this year.
Oh, so many things are happening, right? From the beginning of the year and all the craziness with the fork in the road. Then there's the DRP. Now there's the one big beautiful bill, right? We got and that's just halfway through the year. Who knows what the other half is going to have in store for us?
Yeah, we had to learn a whole new vocabulary this year.
That's right. Well, we wanted to jump in. Tammy and I were kind of pre-gaming about like several things that were happening and really wanted to jump in to let you guys know about some changes that are taking place that you need to be aware of, regardless if you're retiring this year or not, because it's different, right? The answers that we gave, and Tammy, I probably said this joke before. I had a client years ago come to me and said, Micah, like all your clients come in, I'm sure we roughly have the same questions. They just get bored about giving the same answers all the time. I was like, well, actually, no, because the laws change. And so now my answers change. The questions are the same, but my answers are now different. And Tammy, I would say that's pretty much the synopsis of what we're going to talk about is a lot of the same questions, but now our answers are going to be different because of changes in the system. Is that fair?
That's definitely fair. And I would add to that, just to be sure, when you're listening to what we say, take it as your starting point. So look into it for yourself individually, because what you said made me think about, people who listen to what their neighbors have done or their colleagues have done. And that one little difference makes it a different answer or a different action that they should take. So listen to us carefully, but don't follow everything we're saying until you've checked it out for your own situation.
You are 100% correct. Your tax bracket could be different. Your age could be different. Years of service can be different. And now all of a sudden it's a completely different answer for you. That's spot on. Tammy, let's jump into, I would say, I think it's a good change, but it's definitely a change that's taking place. Going from paper applications and being able to fill them out to now the online retirement process. What does that look like? What are the pros? What are the cons? And what are some things we're excited about and things we're watching for to see what happens?
Yeah, well, like everything else in the government, we're going by ORA, online retirement application. I think it's always funny whenever they have to make an acronym for every little thing that we do in the government. So if you hear that, ORA, that's what your HR office is talking about, the online retirement application. And I've talked to some employees who have already filled it out and submitted it. And luckily, the news is coming back saying that this seems to be an improvement, which I'm really happy about. I think it is going to make things a little easier for someone to submit their retirement application, seeing that it's kind of like follow the prompts instead of filling out this long application with 18 pages of directions. It can be daunting, just to look at it. The one person mentioned to me a little tip that they would recommend filling out the paper application so you can kind of go through it once. If you're married, go through it with your spouse. So you kind of have an idea of how you're going to answer those questions that come up. But the other good news is that when you are filling out the online application, it can be done in stages. So you can save where you are, come back to it and work on it again. And the other good thing about it is they're using the login.gov, which is kind of a universal login. So it's kind of easy to access. So there are some good things about it. I believe the HR specialist has to give you access to use it on your home computer. But from what I understand, you don't have to use your government computer since so many employees have lost access to that anyway if they're in the DRP period. So yeah, so lots there that's really interesting.
Yeah, Tammy, I think it's solid advice. I would really recommend people go look at that retirement application, right? Go look at the PDF version of it. Now, the first half of it, we just kind of set aside. That's just all the instructions that are there. And just look at the form fields and it becomes a little bit less daunting. At least that's been my experience when I explain it to clients. They're a little overwhelmed at first and we go kind of line by line through it. It's just your basic information, your employer information, marital information, survivor benefits, and take it one step at a time and get more comfortable with it. And it's more of a emotional reaction to this big change in life is what I see. So I love that advice about doing it in person. Doing it paper first, really looking at it, then jumping online. Also, it's not an irreversible thing until it kind of goes off to OPM. There's kind of different levels of this. So when you first fill it out, that's okay. And I tell my clients, fill it out, then just get me a copy of it, right? This doesn't automatically go to OPM when you click the submit button. If you've accidentally done something wrong, we can go back to your HR and we can make changes, which is why I also like to get it done in advance and not wait till the 11th hour right before retirement.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something that I think a lot of people don't understand, that when you submit this, you're not submitting it to OPM. You're submitting this to your HR office, your human resources of your agency or your component, wherever it is that you work. So I think that's an important thing to note. And also, as you mentioned, filling out the paper form or the PDF, and you can get the paper form or the PDF still at opm.gov. Just go to opm.gov/forms. That'll take you to the forms page. And this is a standard form. So for FERS employees, it's a standard form 3107. And if you're still under CSRS, that's a 2801. So it's a form that you can still find it. You can still even fill it out online, but you can't submit it that way. You have to submit it through the ORA.
And Tammy, I'm excited about this because what I'm hoping for is this is going to, and I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about the HR person. I want to make this comment, so don't take it that way. But I'm hoping it creates a better system for submitting all the documents to OPM at the end of the day, right? Because right now, under the old paper process anyways, they would get all the stuff together, they would then submit it, to OPM and it would go through. But if they were missing a health insurance cert or a certified summary of federal service or something like that, it would delay retirement on the back end. So fingers crossed, there's a good checklist in there that they got to submit all these things. So it's a cleaner application going to OPM.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because there are mistakes employees have made with the paper application where they check the wrong box or they fill out the wrong portion. That will be eliminated because they won't let you do that on the online application. It's going to prompt you to where you need to go next. But like you said, Micah, on the agency side of it, the HR office has a lot of work to do to prepare a retirement package to send to OPM. And there is an agency checklist, but there's also an error rate of agency submissions to OPM that runs in the neighborhood of 20%.
That's 1 out of 5, right? 1 out of 5 is what that number is.
And I think what happens, and I would probably do this too if it was me, in an effort to get this thing over to OPM in a timely manner, I may not have everything I need yet, but hey, I'm just going to send it off and see what happens. And that's going to be an error rate because I left out the health insurance confirmation or transfer, or I've left out the standard form 2801-1 or 3107-1, which is the summary of service that my employee needs to sign before I can send it to OPM. So now you can't leave those things out. Those all have to be included in order to submit that claim for retirement benefits to OPM after the employee has retired. Doesn't go to OPM until after your separation date.
Yeah. So here's what I'm telling my clients, and Tammy, push back on me if you're advising any differently, is saying what this probably means is you're going to get a cleaner app to OPM, but that also means it might be a delayed app to OPM. So as before, they would just kind of send things off right after retirement. Now, if that's their plan and they go to do it and they don't have documentation, it might take a little bit more before that application goes. I don't think that's going to affect, this is me guessing, by the way, so it's a great opportunity for me to be wrong, but I don't think that's going to affect leave cash out and how that goes through if HR is delayed in processing that retirement. But that's something I'm just advising my clients on, is just saying it's an unknown right now. And so anytime there's an unknown, my default is better cash savings. Like if you're banking on your leave payment and that's your only savings you're going to have, and this potentially could delay it for whatever reason for your leave cash out, we probably need to have access to other money just in case.
The key thing for your annual leave payout is that the separation notice, the fact that you're leaving federal service, gets notified to payroll in a timely manner, and that you don't have any government property. So if you still have your work computer or some other document that you have to turn in, if that's not turned in, you're not going to get your annual leave. So that's where I've seen delays in annual leave payouts for individual employees where there's something that they're missing. The agency's missing it. So they kind of hold that hostage until you get all that equipment or that property turned back into the agency. So that can be a problem there. So just be sure that if you have something at home that needs to go back to the agency, you get it back there, because that'll help speed up that process. But, I don't know how that application, if it goes, I know it goes from the employee straight to HR. Does HR then send it to payroll and payroll submits it to OPM? I'm not sure about that whole process. I've seen some training materials on that, but it hasn't been real clear to me. So, but the other thing I would tell employees, and again, you don't have a lot of control over this, but stay in contact, stay in touch with your HR specialist. So if you've been assigned a retirement specialist, contact that person, make a connection with them, ask them questions about things you're not sure about, and consider yourself very fortunate if you do have a name and an email address or a phone number, because that person can be key to making sure you're making the right decisions, or at least understanding the decisions that you're making.
One of the mistakes that I see as a financial advisor after federal employees go to retire is not understanding how it's different when you're in accumulation mode, saving money for retirement, building your TSP, to you're in the distribution mode, pulling money out of the TSP. Sometimes we think that we can manage everything the same, then it comes to retirement and we all of a sudden we have this flood of different types of emotions. And it normally happens to people that generally aren't emotional about investments. And if you are, it happens to you even more. So we put together a guide for you, a free guide, in order to help know what questions you need to ask, know what learning lessons are out there, and how should you build a proper distribution plan with your TSP. This is so important because how you got here in order to be able to retire is not how you're going to stay retired. There are some differences that we need to keep in mind. And most importantly, we have to come up with a plan that not if, when the market goes down for a long period of time, how do we stay dispassionate investors? How do we hold for the long run? In order to get your free guide, jump on our website at planyourfederalretirement.com/TSP after retirement. That's planyourfederalretirement.com/TSP after retirement. Take control of your retirement savings. Get this guide so you can make smarter decisions about your retirement. So then, happy planning.
Yeah. And Tammy, I will say there's some really good ones out there, by the way. There's some great HR but now maybe there's this guy named Micah that works, Department of Interior. That's not me, by the way, but I was biased to his name right away. But there's some really good ones out there that do a fantastic job. So if you're lucky enough to have one, I love that. Build a connection with them, talk with them, make their job easier. It's another thing I talk about retirees all the time is do as much as you can. Because just like anyone else, right? If I have two projects on my desk and one is pretty easy and I can slam through that one, and one is like, oh crap, that's a beast. I'm going to put the beast off. I just am. And I'm going to go through the one that I can really get through. So that's really what I want the employees to do. As much as you can, make this an easy process for your HR person, which means it's an easier process for OPM, which means you get paid sooner, which is what we're solving for at the end of the day.
That's right. I guess another tip I would give employees is if when you are communicating with HR, if you're going to send them an email, don't send them a book. Send them a list of no more than 3 questions and make them brief. Because I got an email probably 2 weeks ago from somebody who sent me a book, paragraph after paragraph of all this explanation that really wasn't relevant to the question. And I put it off. And I sent him an email response when I had some time yesterday. And I maybe wasn't in the best of mood when I did this, but I gave him a tip. I said, hey, next time you send me an email, make it briefer, because that's the reason why I got a delay in your response, because I didn't have time to sit down and read it all. And the question was really one sentence. So he could have done that in much fewer words, which would have made things go a lot smoother for him and for me.
Speaking of smoother, OPM's going through a little bit of a change. So there's a new director, and inside of this, around 1,000 people are expected to be let go of OPM by the end of this year. Now, that's probably not all coming from the retirement department, right? But some of them are definitely going to come from the retirement department. So again, Tammy, this comes to the aspect that more than likely in the near term, retirement might take longer to be processed than shorter. Now, I hope I'm wrong with this. I hope it's Johnny on the spot. They fix things, they go through. But also, didn't we have, I don't know if it was a record, but it was a huge amount of people that retired May and June of this year.
Absolutely. I think it must have been a record, because in the month of May, the month of June, this is coming into the summer months. Everybody's going on vacation typically. No one's really retiring in those months. So we usually see anywhere from 4,000 to maybe 6,000 employees retire each of those months. Not this year. This year, we had close to 30,000 retirements hitting OPM between those 2 months. And I think, and we talked about this before we went on the air, I think it's all due to the fear factor. because that big, beautiful bill had a lot of provisions in it that were going to really negatively affect retirement. But it was a proposal. And what do we always say about proposals, Micah?
We don't pay attention to proposals. We don't plan on the proposals. We plan on current law.
Right.
And that's really, really important, whether it's tax changes, estate changes, benefit changes, Social Security changes. I'm getting a ton of questions. Micah, Social Security is going to run out of money by 2032. Turn it on now. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let's kind of look at the bigger picture here, because Tammy, what this turns into is an emotional decision. And I know you know that, right? Not a financial decision. So I really want to try to separate those out as much as I can. And I think this example of 30,000 retirees is a really good one. Is fear came upon us and we said, we have to go now. Now, maybe you were ready to go. Maybe it was a good decision. And you're like, you know what? I just don't want to worry about this thing. I'm going to retire 6 months sooner than I planned. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're like, oh my gosh, they're about to get me out all my benefits. I'm going to go from a high 3 to a high 30, right? Or, whatever the fear is that's there. Now, all of a sudden, this is now an emotional decision. And we got to check that, because I know a big thing was the first supplement was going away. But Tammy, what actually happened to the first supplement in the One Big Beautiful Bill?
It's still there where it always was. I mean, I know this has been attacked in the past several times in different legislation. And if you look back, I've been doing this and you've been doing it a long time too, but I'm a little older than you. So I go back almost 40 years in this business. And I could count on one hand how many negative changes to retirement there have been in those 40 years. Those are really hard to pass because they take congressional action, and Congress doesn't like to make their constituents unhappy. And there's a lot of lobbying effort in there to protect and preserve our benefits. And last but not least, the staff in Congress, congressmen and women themselves, guess what? They're covered under FERS or civil service, just like, other federal employees. So they don't want to make those negative changes. They're going to hurt themselves and their loyal staff. So, you very rarely see those big negative changes happen. So there was no elimination of the first supplement, not this year, not next year, not the year after.
I want to say this again, just because I'm still getting questions. Is Micah, the first supplement's going away in 2028, right? I got an email yesterday about that. Yeah, and it came from a proposal, right? Which is why I kind of have it in our notes to chat about, right? It didn't make it to that final draft. Now, I think it was in the proposal up to like the 11th hour, by the way. It was definitely in there, but now that's not a thing. Tammy, what about the high 3 to the high 5?
High 3, it's still there. So we don't have to worry about high 5 or high 30 or nothing. It's still the high 3. What else was in there? It was the increased contributions for all employees. That went away. There was a lot of really scary things in there. So I can understand why people were afraid. In fact, I was really hesitant to tell people, don't retire, because what if it did happen and I'd be the one with the face. So, I didn't say one way or the other. I wouldn't recommend that, but I did see people make some pretty sad mistakes. I had one employee who misunderstood. So he's going to be 62 in January of 2026. And he has over 20 years of service. And he put his retirement application in for not for June 30th, but for September 30th, thinking that he can just delay sending the application to OPM until January.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not how that works.
It's on the day you separate, the age you were on the date of separation. So he lost 10% bump in his retirement, which added up to thousands of dollars a year. I mean, it's a sad thing, and he can't pull it out. The agency's not letting him rescind his application. So,
and Tammy, what we're talking about, I'm sure our listeners are tracking, but just to make sure, right? You get that extra bonus, an extra 10% increase in your pension if you make it to 62 and 20 or more years of federal service. But you got to meet both of those requirements, right? Not just one of those. And that's what he made. He made it to 61 and 9 months with 20 years, but that's not 62 with 20 years of service. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we mean by 10% bonus, because I hear a lot of misunderstanding on this, it's not 10% of your high 3 more. It's 10% of the retirement. So instead of 1% for every year of service, you're getting 1.1%. That's 10% per year more. So that's what it means. So it's not as good as, get an extra 10% of 150,000. It's 10% more on the 30,000 or whatever your retirement would have been. But it's still thousands of dollars for many employees.
It's thousands of dollars. It's a great bonus. Is it a reason to keep working between 57 if you're eligible and 62? No. Like that alone, if you're financially eligible, that's a stretch. Should you work an extra couple of months to get a 10% bonus? Yep, I'm going to go with that. Instead of retiring in September, move it to January to get a 10% bonus. I think that would probably make a lot of sense.
I've talked many 60-year-olds off the ledge. They're 60 with 20 years. I'm like, man, 2 more years. You'll have not only the 1.1%, but you'll have 22 years. And it's only 2 years. And you'll get the real Social Security, which is so much better than the supplement. And you'll get COLA. So there's so many good things about waiting until 62 if you're within a couple of years. Like, you say months, I say a couple of years. My years go like months.
Fair enough. So the important lesson that's here, and there's a lot of stuff in the OBA, however we're saying that right now. In fact, I just got off a tax conference talking about this. There's so many things inside there that we need to understand from a tax perspective. So I know we're going to do a future pod on that. Definitely some things to think about inside of there. But the great news is at the end of the day, you have the same great set of federal benefits. There's nothing material stuff on taxes have changed for the better, in my opinion, but nothing better as in lower taxes, but nothing from the aspect of the federal benefits changing, going away, getting reduced.
Right. And the one thing I want to clarify, and this is a question for you or a comment. Well, I know we didn't pre-talk about this, but I think you definitely know the answer. So I got an email from somebody who was really upset about the new elimination of tax on Social Security benefits. And I had to tell him, I'm like, it's not an elimination of tax. The tax on Social Security hasn't changed. It's still what it was before this law passed. But what did change, Micah, just in a brief little sentence? Why do they think Social Security is now tax-free?
Right. So they didn't make Social Security tax-free. They put a senior bonus deduction in place with an extra $6,000 per person over the age of 65. So if you're married, filing joint, and you're both over 65, that's an extra $12,000 deduction. That's on top of your current standard deduction, on top of the extra $1,600 for being already over 65. This is a bonus, but the bonus has a phase out with it. And the phase out starts at $150,000 of modified adjusted gross income. All right, you said a sentence, I'm giving you a novel. Sorry, I geeked out on the tax stuff. Long story short, there's an extra huge bonus that's there. But if you have a really good pension and TSP, you got to be careful on how you're going to plan for this, because a lot of people might be over that 150. So I was actually working on a case before we jumped on the podcast, Tammy, just outlining it for a client, how we're going to utilize this every other year with a combination of IRA and Roth money. And we're just going to go back and forth with this because why not get as much of the deduction as we possibly can before it goes away? Because it is a short deduction. Don't quote me on this, but it's like 28 or 29. I've written down somewhere. It goes away in the next couple of years. So this isn't a permanent thing.
That's right. And just goes to say, as I always say to people, when I'm done counseling someone on their benefits, I'm like, if you haven't done any tax planning, get with someone who can help you there, because that's really a place where you can save some money if you do it the right way. And don't wait till you're 73 to start tax planning.
Mm-hmm. Boy, another thing that was not part of this bill, it was actually part of last year, but I do want to remind people, we keep forgetting that if you're between 60 and 63, you get a bonus contribution. Right now, your catch-up contribution, if you will, is $7,500 in addition to your normal TSP contribution. That goes from $7,500 to $11,250. So you can put more money in your TSP if you're between 60 and 63. So really important. This doesn't happen automatically. If you're in that window, you got to jump online to TSP. You got to increase those contributions in order to max that out.
And you can only do it while you're working. I've been getting emails from people saying, can I still contribute to my TSP after I leave? I'm like, no. But you have to take advantage of that before you separate. And if you are leaving September 30th, you can put all of that in there by September 30th if you increase your biweekly allotment, because you're still getting paid if you're in the DRP phase out period.
Yeah, 100%. So big takeaways that I'm going to say on this is, boy, this whole podcast, I guess, really talks about separating out your emotions from the facts, starting with the retirement application. It's an online thing. Clients are getting a little concerned about that, thinking it's an irreversible thing. Great news, it's not. Right? I want to get it correct before it goes to OPM, but when you first fill that out, right, it's just going to HR, but fill it out in paper, and then we go through it. And then Tammy, I love the point that you brought up that there's only been a couple of things in 40 years, which is benefits changes, which were negative for federal employees. And we see this again in the current legislation.
Yeah. And so if you ask me to name what those handful of things are, I really can't think of anything that was really onerous. Probably the worst thing that happened was getting rid of civil service and replacing it with FERS. But if you ask people under FERS today if they'd go back to civil service, many of them say, no, thanks. I don't want to give up the matching. I don't want to give up the flexibility. So that really wasn't a bad thing for most people.
No, so it's pretty, you have a great benefit system, not a good benefit system. You have a great benefit system, and knowing and understanding it to get the maximum, that's really the key.
It isn't the easiest system in the world. There's some complications, but it's only because it is so generous. I still say it's intact. We haven't lost any of it.
It is. And it made it through this OBA bill, and it's still intact, and you have great benefits that are out there. So it's fantastic. So your homework assignment is to make sure you have facts, not feelings about your benefits. It's not, and the misunderstanding, boy, Tammy, your example of that is saying, well, I'll just delay my retirement until I'm 62 and submit that application. That's not how it works. And just because you think it's a good idea doesn't mean how the system is. Now, the good news is it's pretty spelled out how the system works, but it's a little complicated. So you got to make sure you understand that.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's the biggest problem, but you can solve it by doing your research, ask questions.
Awesome. Well, remember to like and subscribe. Our goal is to help another 1 million federal employees with their retirement. So send this out to some more people. Tammy, thanks again for being on here. I always love having you on. And until next time, happy planning.